Hello everyone, I'm Mika Thrimsdottir, and this is Seeking Dinah, where I go down various mystical rabbit holes to see what, or who, I can find, to help dig out unhealthy social structures and stereotypes at their roots. In the first set of videos, Seeking Dinah in Genesis, I looked at the tragedy of Dinah and how her story signals the death of matriarchal culture in what would become ancient Israel. In this video, I'll be sharing what happens to the book of Isaiah, and as a side note, the peoples of Israel, when it's read with her experience in mind. If you remember, Dinah is the only recorded daughter of Jacob and any of his wives. She was supposed to inherit all of the wealth of her mother's household, and probably all of the wealth of her aunt's household as well. She was supposed to have a wealthy and powerful husband. But instead, her brothers Simeon and Levi killed her fiancé with all of his friends. Then they took everything in hers for themselves. The matriarchal traditions were buried under a tree soon afterward, and Jacob received a new title, Israel. This name was then given to everyone in the now patriarchal household, which was divided into 12 tribes, starting with the eldest son. When Moses led the people of Israel through the wilderness, they traveled according to these tribes. Just for fun, because we can. Let's take a look at that. The organization of the tribes of Israel appears in the book of Numbers, and here's an interesting thing. Dinah doesn't exist, but there are still 13 places. The tribe of Joseph has been divided between his sons Ephraim and Manasseh, and Levi has become a priest caste, responsible for the Ark of the Covenant and the temple shrine. If you are thinking that Levi seems to have taken over the position that Dinah should have had if her mother's gods hadn't been buried under a tree, well, I'm thinking the same thing. When these folks conquered and settled in Canaan, or Canaan, or however you want to pronounce it, which is this region here, the tribes got their own territories, like so. As the 13th tribe and the priest caste, Levi didn't get a territory. They wandered. Now, the most important place in the kingdom of Judah was and is the city of Jerusalem, which is approximately here. Jerusalem is in hill country. When King David, the second king of Judah, started consolidating his power, one of the first things he did was conquer all of his neighbors. One of the places King David conquered was at the base of Jerusalem's eastern hill. Yes, I know, terribly original name. The fortress here was called the Stronghold of Zion, so this is the original Mount Zion. David built his own palace there, but the name stayed around. Under the reign of his son Solomon, the tribe of Levi would finally get their own territory, of a sort. The top of this hill was where the Temple of Solomon was built, and the Second Temple after that. For those of you feeling a bit confused, the Western Hill apparently became Mount Zion during Roman occupation because it's higher and more imposing or something. The point is that this hill is the location of some of the earliest settlement in the area, the site of the palace of King David, who is Judah's favorite king, the site of the one and only temple to Israel's God, the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant, and as far as the descendants of Jacob are concerned, it is very much the spiritual heart of the spiritual home of the people of Israel. And now that we know all of this stuff, we can start looking at the book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah is one of the most important texts in the Bible. It is the first, and at 66 chapters, it's also the longest of the mystical texts labeled the later prophets, which all record visions and prophecies given at various times and places to the people of Judah. Why Judah and not the other tribes? Well, the other tribes got conquered and scattered and lost, and all that were left were Judah and Simeon, along with a few Levite priests and some descendants of Benjamin. The oldest extant version of the book of Isaiah is a scroll dated to the 1st or 2nd century BCE, and it's held by the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. You can visit their website and check it out. It's called the Isaiah Scroll, handily enough. Most versions of the text, however, can be traced to a group of dedicated scholars towards the end of the 10th century CE who didn't have access to this scroll. It was buried in a cave near the Dead Sea at the time. That's okay, because this is one text that didn't change much over the centuries. The first verse tells us that this book is a record of the visions given to Isaiah, son of Amos, who lived in Judah during the reign of 4 of its kings: Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. All of these dates are very fuzzy, so take them with a grain of salt, but even so, this is a long time to be prophesying. But each of these kings was dealing with the same problem: the empire of Assyria, which was having a marvelous time gobbling up as much territory as it could. Each of these kings was trying to figure out how to remain independent, or at least how to survive, when Assyria had already conquered and taken so much, and was bound and determined to take more. As a result, most of the book of Isaiah is about war. Many, many decades of it. But the book of Isaiah isn't nearly as monotonous as it could be, because in and around all the discussion of warfare and morals and ethics, and lack of morals and ethics, which is all very important in its own right, but isn't our focus right now, there is a beautiful poem of desolation, loss, grief, and then ultimately joy and salvation. A lot of it uses a literary conceit called chiasmus, the most obvious example being between the first half and the second half, but there are dozens more. The trick to understanding chiasmus is that it's a mirror. The first half is reflected somehow in the second half, and putting the two together results in a better understanding of the whole concept. So anything or anyone we see in the first half should be referenced again in the second half, in the opposite location. The very first chapter introduces all our major players: the backsliding people of Israel who are unfilial and impious, strangers who wander through the country at will, doing whatever they want, the daughter of Zion, who is in a rather miserable situation, rulers of Sodom and people of Gomorrah, which are 2 cities that no longer exist. These terms are used to describe any wicked and evil community that is on the verge of being destroyed for its crimes against the universe. There's a bit of a harangue about people who offer sacrifices and offerings, aka priests and religious officials, where the Lord rejects them due to wickedness. Lots of wickedness. And then there are the widows and orphans, who deserve a whole lot better than what they're getting. Finally, we have not the daughter of Zion, but Zion herself, who is promised that things will not always be horrible. It is significant that both the mountain and the city of Zion are gendered feminine. The mountain is mother, the city is daughter. Neither mountains nor cities are nomadic, at least not as a general rule. The mountain is rooted in the bones of the earth, and the city is built from the bones of the mountain. The city will never leave the mountain, even though it crumbles into ruins. The daughter will never leave her mother, not even to become a mother herself. Thus, whether intentionally or not, this poetic metaphor references the ideal of a matrilocal society. Although Isaiah refers to the mother-daughter pairing of Zion in the first chapter, there are very few references to either of them throughout the first 2/3 of the book. There are a couple in chapters 10 and 16 to the mountain of the daughter of Zion and the hill of Jerusalem, which sounds like a goddess's sanctuary more than anything, and is peculiar in that it does not reference the Lord at all. And just in case you think this is an accident or a mere convention that we shouldn't take all that seriously, Isaiah, or whoever was recording for him, could very easily have made it masculine. Chapter 18 does just that, when it calls Mount Zion the place of the name of the Lord of hosts. Even so, chapter 37 returns to the conceit, treating not just the daughter of Zion, but also the daughter of Jerusalem as beings or entities of power and authority. When the Lord says to tell King Hezekiah that neither the daughter of Zion nor the daughter of Jerusalem is impressed by King Sennacherib of Assyria, it sounds as though the Lord and the two daughters are all hanging out together as friends do, and the Lord just pulled away from the phone to ask, "Hey, are either of you impressed by this Sennacherib dude?" And both of them reply, "No!" Jeez. Not all references to daughter cities are as amusing, however. Tarshish and Zidon are both given various warnings. Babylon gets an entire chapter all to herself. There are also references to the unhappy fate of many ordinary women, some of them the inhabitants of Zion, who think they have escaped calamity, warning them to stop their foolishness sooner rather than later. Chapter 32 is just one example. There is one more reference to Jerusalem, separate from Zion. This one, in chapter 40, foretells the promises of hope and salvation that are spelled out, beginning with chapter 49. Up until chapter 49, in spite of all the references to the Mount of the Daughter of Zion, and although the Lord occasionally hangs out with her and has a good laugh, in a very real sense, Zion and her daughter are still in the same situation they were in the very first chapter, abandoned, alone, and besieged. In chapter 49, Zion's feelings of abandonment is given voice. She says quite clearly, "The Lord has forsaken me, and my Lord has forgotten me." And here is where the mother who has lost everything is given the most beautiful promise. "Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Thy walls are continually before me. Thy children shall make haste. Thy destroyers and they that made thee waste shall go forth of thee. Lift up thine eyes round about, and behold. All these gather themselves together and come to thee. As I live, saith the Lord, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all as with an ornament, and bind them on thee as a bride doth. For thy waste and thy desolate places in the land of thy destruction shall even now be too narrow by reason of the inhabitants, and they that swallowed thee up shall be far away. The children which thou shalt have, after thou hast lost the other, shall say again in thine ears, This place is too strait for me, give place to me that I may dwell. Then shalt thou say in thy heart, Who hath begotten me these, seeing I have lost my children, and am desolate, a captive, and removing to and fro, and who hath brought up these? Behold, I was left alone. These, where had they been? Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will lift up mine hand to the Gentiles, and set up my standard to the people, and they shall bring thy sons in their arms, and thy daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders. And kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and their queens thy nursing mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their face toward the earth, and lick up the dust of thy feet. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord, for they shall not be ashamed that wait for thee. In chapters 51 and 52, there are some more promises of comfort and rejoicing, promises that evil will no longer have hold in these women's homes. It reminds me of those Greek myths where the faithful wife or beautiful princess has to deal with horrid men who call themselves guests but refuse to leave, raping her servants, eating everything in the pantry, ruining her peace, and saying that if she'd just marry one of them, everything would be fine. Chapter 54, however, is the one that really gets to me. Sing, O barren, thou that didst not bear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, thou that didst not travail with child. For more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife, saith the Lord. Now, I don't know if there is anyone in all of Israel who is more desolate than Dinah. Dinah was raped, which has, for whatever reason, so often been a shamed place on the woman and not on the man. She became a widow without ever having been a wife. She has spent millennia as simply the tragic victim of a weird cultural moment in myth history. She should have been a mother. She should have been a queen. She should have had everything. She got nothing. And this next passage solidifies my feeling that it's Dinah Isaiah is talking about. He doesn't tell this desolate woman to enlarge the walls of her city as he tells Zion. No. He tells her to enlarge the place of her tent. Dinah never saw the gates of Jerusalem. She never dwelt in Zion. She lived in a tent her whole life. And here's another important thing. Whatever shame was attached to Dinah for being raped, whatever reproach she faced for being a widow, none of it will matter anymore. She will have children, countless numbers of children, all acknowledging her as their mother, because she doesn't just have any old husband anymore. Her husband is the Lord. So here we have two women, one Zion, who lost all of her children and then has them miraculously returned. The other, unnamed, deliberately, carefully left to the reader's imagination, who is even more miraculously provided with a literal horde of descendants. And in chapter 62, we get this. Say ye to the daughter of Zion, Behold, thy salvation cometh, and thou shalt be called, sought out, a city not forsaken. Now I want to be clear what's happening in this passage because this is important. Here is Mount Zion, and maybe the city of Zion too. She's not going anywhere. She does not leave her home in order to find her children. Her children return home to her. And here is the forsaken one. You don't have to believe that she's Dinah or the daughter of Zion if you don't want to. If there is another righteous woman who had everything taken from her, if there is another myth-historical female who is as important to the family of Israel and suffered as she did, you can put her name there instead. Whoever she is, she doesn't leave home in order to get married and have children. Her husband and all of her children come to her. The Lord doesn't take his bride up into heaven, which is his home. He joins her on earth, in hers. And that holds true no matter which prophecy you read throughout the entirety of the Bible. This is matrilocal. And since all of these children are asking their mother, rather than their father, for land and places to live, it's matrilineal as well. So, if you happen to believe in the Bible and you want to know what the Bible thinks utopia looks like, you might want to start here with matrilocal, matrilineal practices. And if you're worried about what men would do in such a society, well, that's in Isaiah too. So anyway, it looks like we found Dinah. She's in the wilderness waiting for us, in that place where women are the householders and the lineage keepers for their own families, rather than for the families of strangers. Where men really only have to change one thing. Instead of bringing their wives home to their households and passing inheritances to their sons, they leave home and join their wives' households, and inheritance passes through their daughters. See you next time, and thanks for watching.